Akkor a technikai tudnivalókat még stream nélkül, és akkor összenézünk, és akkor a stream start, és akkor akár ezt most is.
Üdvözlök mindenkit, mielőtt a
Cordially welcome everyone. And before we plunge into the official part, here is some technicalities for you. During the morning session, we'll stream both the roundtable discussion and the presentations. The stream will go to everyone who has signed up. And locally, you will have received receivers, and the infrared receivers come with some instructions. You may want to know that you need to connect your earphone. You then, once this is done, turn it on, and English channel will be number 2, whereas Hungarian will be number 1. That goes for both the presentations and the roundtable discussion. The conference will be running simultaneously in both languages, since we have English speaking and Hungarian speaking speakers as well. We will switch between languages all the time, but feel free to select the language of your choice. Obviously, those of you who are bilingual will not have to resort to this. May I just test English channel number 2 by a show of hands who's receiving English in the room? You do not receive English in the room. Okay. Cordially welcome again. Ladies and gentlemen, to our conference titled You Call Me Out Upon the Waters, held by our Ignatian workshop, with the urge to bring experts together, ones or closer to each other, ones who are engaged in working with young people. We sometimes are bewildered by technical hitches, so we will have speakers today who are engaged with working with young people in whatever format. We're very glad that we have such a nice turnout, which will cast a glance to our present situation. I'm overjoyed today to see and welcome students who follow online, who follow our roundtable discussion, and ones who join and connect from elsewhere in Europe and worldwide. We are privileged to have you online. Thank you. Number 1, may I first and foremost ask our Father Provincial Elemér Vizi to come up with his welcome address today. A wholehearted welcome to all of you, both domestically, locally, and internationally, visitors here and online. It is a great joy for me to have come together in this congregation to exchange our views on methodology concerning pedagogy and education. Whenever the Jesuit order was generated, we did not think of ever having to maintain education institutions, but when in 1540 the order is accepted and passed, the statutes shall, of course, make mention of upbringing and education, but when, like 7 years after the order is acknowledged and accepted, in Sicily, in Messina, they are invited to open a monastery, a college rather. It is recognized in the Ignatian spirit just how great it is to be able to educate young people, i.e. the future, because it was then already recognized that that is something which has to do and is the future itself. What it took was a teaching or pedagogical methodology under the Ignatian spirit. He went back. They went back to the roots. He was educated in Paris. He studied in Paris, and it was his desire that those who follow will follow his Paris principles, and it was then supplemented by much more, i.e. the spiritual way. It is merged with the Paris method, and as if woven together, the new method is born through the years. That has to do with Ratio Studionum, and something which in 1590, much after Saint Ignatius' death, was still alive and prevalent. In fact, everyone went out of their way and did their best to exchange their views internationally in a trans-border fashion, just whatever experiences they have gathered in the process of teaching others, and that is how Ratio Studionum was generated and promoted, the only and still the only uniform education system which was and is universal, and obviously not all of the elements and units of the document issued in 1590 now, but we still strive to enforce the analyses of our experiences in education, and not just exchange and share this, not in Jesuit circles and community, but elsewhere, and we are assisted in this in our way to proper education using the Ignatian method and spirit. Myself have not been much engaged in education except from my practice years, but I know much about the other side, the other side of the fence, so to say. And when we put together our experiences, and this is what surely the agenda of today will be, apparently if we go by the title saying "You Call Me Out Upon the Waters," this will come back several times when Peter is invited by Jesus to step out from the barge. if you recall, this is a basic principle or orientation which sets the route for our or the avenue for our work, which we are all set to enforce. If we recall the story, then we know that Peter did not just jump out on the water by himself, on his own devices, just to test himself. He's not just going towards the void, but there is Jesus opposite to him, and then it's you whose direction I am walking, and upon invitation is how Peter reacts. That is his reaction by virtue of which we see him called upon the waters. Not without uncertainty, and not with uncertainty, rather. We often find situations where we have to be certain, where we have to be deserted. And if we go by the Bible, we should be looking for invitations and challenges. The way in which Peter steps out of the barge, he is in eye contact, so to say, with Jesus. And this eye contact that he maintains with Jesus is something that is a safeguard for him to remain safe on his way upon waters. He may look away, he may be scared and frightened in his ways, but we know that that Peter starts sinking. But before he sinks, there is Jesus in front of him, with whom he is in contact, and not just eye contact. And that is what that is the spirit in which we have selected the title, which is brilliant, because the Ignatian spirit, the pedagogy and education objectives are spelled out in a perfect way, because there has to be a connection, and this connection is something that keeps us alive, and all the rest just is something that will come. Because if you remain in touch with Jesus, then anyone will be able to march along with him in life. And the very same goes to our students. If we're able in our schools and education institutions to upbring them in a way that is more than just transferring knowledge, but also aiding them in terms of culture and their other objectives. Now, their beliefs is something that we should be promoting and keep them as believers. And the idea and the objective is for them to be able to be strong when they leave school, and that they will remain strong because they have links and contacts, they have connections. Now, another important aspect is when people come to our places, when we invite them for a discussion, for a chat, just to talk to us. Now, as a spiritual leader, as principal, my job is to open a space for anyone visiting me to be able, for him or her, to speak in a way that he or she recognizes the Almighty's presence. Wise people teaching here used to say, within these walls, by the way, the following: when someone leaves a conversation, discussion that was engaged with you, just pay attention on the way he or she leaves, because he leaves prematurely, and when he leaves non-smiling, that it was not a good discussion. He or she did not feel good. But although when anyone leaves a discussion or conversation with you, should be beaming, should be recognizably happy, because that discussion was with God. That is why we have to remain personal, and Ignatian pedagogy is something that we should be continuously transferring in schools for them to help them for the students and disciples to remain in touch with God, to personify, to tailor-make our contact with individuals, for them to best use their capacities and capabilities that were gifted to them by God, to remain useful anywhere in life. Allow me, in conclusion, to briefly share a thought with you, and especially having to do with spiritual leadership. When I served in Dobogókő, I was approached once by a young person Sunday afternoon. He knocked on my door, and I was very, very happy when I heard him saying, "There's a letter I'd like you, Professor, to read." Instead of talking, he submits, hands over a letter. I later found out that he was in psychosis and he had difficulties talking, but then he needed my help. So I had to resort to something physical, so I went out with him in the snow to shovel snow. And that is when he opened up to me. He said, "As we speak, I found out that when I'm grateful, when there is gratitude inside of me, then I'm in touch with reality. However, in contrast, when I'm scared, I tend to mistake reality for non-reality. So whenever I am in a state of fear, I do not recognize reality." The very same goes with Peter and his time upon waters, because if you are intimidated, you're not yourself. But we definitely have to be able to remain positive in our way of thinking, because we are not alone. We should be aware at all times that we are not alone. And Ignatianly speaking, the way Ignatian, the word Ignatian, the term, sparks or ignites or triggers fears, but we are using methods that assists individuals for the rest of their lives. But that is exactly what I'd like to wish upon you, ladies and gentlemen, dear audience, both here and online. The message is that we lead a discerning life, paying attention, listening to each other. Teachers, pedagogues have to be properly assessed, properly valued, and recognized, because they are the ones who are responsible for the future in a very responsible and important position. I'd like to underline that I am privileged and esteemed that our international speakers feature Sandra Shaul, and apparently I have been in touch and known Sandra Shaul, having attended several fora of provincials. She has come several times, and we did capitalize a lot. No matter how or nice or not nice the term sounds, we did capitalize a lot from this, and she managed to deter and orient our attention towards just this, where God is present, when the Almighty's leadership is tangible. So this is what I like to wish upon you, thanking the Polish and Italian visitors today. So what I like to wish upon you is that we share success and experience. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Father Elamir, for his thoughts, and I can say that he has placed us on water. And as for me, may I have a short introduction following Father Elamir? My name is Ilona Knight, and I've been in charge of this pedagogical workshop for 3 years, and it's to my great pleasure that in this daily renewal I'm not alone, because this pedagogical workshop, there are two legs, two pillars. We have this location here in Horansky Street too, and in Miskolc in the northeastern part of Hungary, in a secondary school in Fény Street, and one of our professionals is working there, Kingo, who is with us today, and Laszlo Elek is also a very important person in this pedagogical workshop, who thinks with us every day, who accompanies us along the road, and he makes sure that the Ignatian spirit should stay with us, and so that the wind blows when we are on board a boat on the water, and if we want a storm, then he ignites strong wind. And may I kindly request that he comes to the pulpit and delivers his address, and also he has prepared a small surprise for us. So it's more simple for me to speak in Hungarian. So the Ignatian pedagogy has a very important part, and it's a reflection. And it's not just simple reflection, what have I done correctly, what I haven't, but this reflection and review. Through this, it's a reflection or review with God. And we are not saying whether God would do this or that, but if we can see through God's eyes and look at our own deeds and actions, what do we see? Where is He in our desires, in our deeds, in our actions? And this is why it's so important here, this picture and this logo that you can see projected onto the screen. And there's a sailing boat with a candle here with me as well. So, and we have to be on water, and if we are afraid, then we just sink. But if we can see through God's eyes, listen to His call, and where He is in the history of our lives, then we have a chance to be upon the waters without sinking, and we have a chance to make progress. And may I call you now, so before we emerge in the presentations, we submerge in the presentations, let us be present here. And we have a song now, which is about being upon the waters and about His call for us to be upon the waters, and so that we do not get afraid of the waves in the water. And this is a call for us, that while we are listening to this song, there will be silence. So just take a few deep breaths. We have arrived, we are here, and then let's try to seek God. Where is God here? Is He calling us from far away, or is He moving us now? So there's this reflection that we exercise at the beginning and in the middle and at the end of a conference, and the same applies to our daily lives. So what is the direction that God designs for us? What's this final good? What is my desire now? And we have about 10 minutes for us to relax and allow God to call us, even if in this small boat. But if we have to get overboard, we should not be worried.
Elvileg. Lehúzott. Jó.
Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior.
Mindenható Istenünk,
God Almighty, let's not really take this step, not even from a wobbling boat, and technically either, and as a human being, it's also very difficult. But now we are getting to know each other, and then we are holding on to each other, and then we are going to learn new things, new features. We trust in you, and even if our small sea is stormy, or if the waters are quiet, we should dare to see with your eyes and step out on the open water with you. Amen. Thank you very much, Father Laszlo, for this arrival that lasted for some minutes, and it's quite difficult for me to invite you to have a taste of the Ignatian Pedagogical Workshop and what we deal with during our everyday activities. Since there are quite a lot of people who are listening to this presentation online and in English, and I'm going to stick to my presentation, and I'm not going to add additional information to my presentation, but it's very important for me to say that there's a motto that this workshop, that we selected for this workshop, and this motto goes like, let's grow together in faith and in vocation. And as Father Elamir also mentioned, that personal care is really very important, and it's part of our everyday activities that we would really like to achieve more and more important results. And in order for us to create a balance between these two, we make efforts so that we could provide resources for teachers and professionals who deal with children so that they can renew themselves every day and so that they can retain their internal resources. Meanwhile, we are trying to provide motivation and support for them so that we do not get lost in our vocation, and so that we have endurance and upkeep the idea that we were born to be teachers, and no matter how difficult it is to row the boat, and no matter how serious the storms are, the beautiful features of this profession keeps us here. And these are our governing thoughts when we think about training courses and workshops that could serve as resources that make up the Ignatian Pedagogy. And we have 15 different training courses, and we have 5 accredited training courses, and 30 are accredited course about conflict management will start next week. And then we also help people to cooperate, and then we also provide support in spiritual matters. And the highlighted area, a very important area in the area of our training courses, that the Gyula Fényi Jesuit Secondary School publishes various curricula and topics, and there are special methodologies and excellent methodologies that we scatter and spread and share with various other educational institutions. And of course, you can read more about our methodology on our website on the internet. It's really very important for us to publish books and various publications along 2 main lines for domestic experts and spiritual leaders. And we collect the experience of spiritual leaders, and we enter the market with these publications, if I may use these words. And we also pay close attention to international publications that are worth translating and make available for the public in Hungary. You can see some book covers here, and one of our latest publications is So Our Hearts Were Ablazed, and Father Alec helped us with the coordination, and this contains material based on more than 10 years of experience of the Gyula Fényi Jesuit Secondary School, and also related methodology about how to call upon children.
Another product, so to say, of our facility is something that has to do with COVID. That is when it was generated, because we were quite challenged as teachers and professors during the crisis that was caused by the virus, because we all had to go online and teach online. But there is a myriad of other subject matters. If you click on our website, A number of our books are available digitally, and several of them in hard copy are here and are available for viewing and reading, but most of them are available digitally and can be ordered through our website, through our Jesuit website. A third pillar, so to say, of our Ignatian workshop is research, because we do work together with education institutions, facilities, primary schools, even kindergartens. And in 2021, for example, when we embarked on the way of how to develop and promote schools and educational systems and curricula, and then the social relations, and this is something that has to do with the current year. When in a year of research, we looked into the social relations and the impact, the environmental impact, and the analysis of the dropout and the process of dropping out, which is something that will remain available. Do follow us. This is how you can access and reach us. Please pay attention, and there's anything you feel could be of common interest, feel free to contact us. Up next, for as much as an hour, we will have, and she's cordially welcome, we'll have Sandra Shaul, and she will introduce herself as the head of her research chapter. She will talk about dialogue and how important dialogue is, and she will share her thoughts on that with us. It was in 2015 when, and since, she's been working with the Jesus Society locally and internationally to develop programs that promote discernment, apostolic planning, and leadership, and in an Ignatian way, and facilitate shared discernment processes. She accompanies individuals and groups and religious congregations in Lebanon, Syria, and also in Europe, elsewhere in Europe. Her expertise lies in creating spaces for listening and discernment, and cultivating conversations and relationships that do support development and growth. Before the floor goes to Sandra, I will ask Riva Stotkinga, Dr. Peter Nidemi, and our colleague to share some information with us concerning how we liaise with Sandra and how we are linked to her. Cordial welcome again, everyone. I can only confirm what Father Elamir had said in terms of how much working together with Sandra means to him. I think we Hungarians seem to tend to have liked her. And this is already the third such training session that she's been at the helm of. I'm involved in an Ignatian leader or management development program, and she is the only female, apparently, of the four who are engaged in this activity, which is a virtue and something that has to be underlined. And additionally, she brings in a lot of emotions and also personal attention, and she merges this with humor and a very open mind. I have to come to like her a lot. She's a value, she's a gem, she's a fortune that needs to be shared with others. So let's just do that. She's very excited. I keep telling her she shouldn't be excited. Whenever she steps to the podium, she'll forget her concerns.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be with you today, and it's very humbling. The words of Father Elemer and Kinga, I mean, I'm very humbled by what you said. We're just waiting for the support of the IT. I'll be speaking in English, and thank you for the translator to be translating my keynote. I'll make sure to be speaking slowly, and whenever I'm going too fast, just make a sign. Had someone told me a few years ago that I will be working in the church in Europe or addressing you in Budapest today, I would have probably found this very unlikely. I come from a background of finance. I had studied finance and worked in it. And before finding myself drawn in 2010 to the world of leadership. And it was in 2010 that I started facilitating these leadership formation, mainly for corporations, so for companies in the Middle East, and doing some projects for the Jesuits in the region, in Lebanon and in Syria. And when the provincial back then invited me to collaborate more with the province and participate in an Ignatian leadership program in Europe, I was very excited, but I had never imagined where this journey will take me. So if I look back at these years from 2010 until now, they've been eventful in so many ways, and they have shaped the way I understand my vocation and the way I exercise my calling. So if I can share anything about this journey, and I hope to do that with you today, it will mainly be around finding meaning, finding hope, and finding a sense of community through dialogue, first with myself, with others, with the world, and with God. So over the next 45 minutes, hopefully, I'll be considering how these questions impact our vocation. And I'll be offering these from my personal experience, hoping that it can also bring some meaning for your sense of vocation as teachers and educators. And I have organized my intervention around some themes, and I hope to give a space between each theme for you to reflect on how this applies, how this resonates with your own lived experience, and maybe if you feel comfortable, turn to a neighbor and share a bit about how these words are resonating with you. But since this topic is mainly around dialogue as an affirming power of our vocation, and since dialogue is about listening, I will just invite us to take some time, and I will offer a poem. The poem is by Rob Bell. It invites us to enter mindfully in this space together, just a bit like the song we started the day with. So I just invite us to take a comfortable seat and allow these words to resonate, not just with our minds, but with our hearts. Walk, don't run. That's it. Walk, don't run. Slow down, breathe deeply, and open your eyes. Because there's a whole world right here within this one. The bush doesn't suddenly catch on fire. It's been burning the whole time. Moses is simply moving slowly enough to see it. And when he does, he takes off his sandals. Not because the ground has suddenly become holy, but because he's just now becoming aware that the ground has been holy the whole time. Efficiency is not God's highest goal for our life. Neither is busyness, or how many things we can get done in one day, or speed, or even success. But walking, which leads to seeing, now that's something. That's the invitation for every one of us today and every day, in every conversation, interaction, event, and moment. To walk and not run. And in doing so, to see a whole world right here within this one. To see a whole world right here within this one. So maybe the first point of my keynote is how the power of silence and questions play a role in our vocation. In 2010, I was gifted the opportunity to walk and not run, to slow down, and engage in a dialogue that I had never dared to have with myself. Back then, I was still working in finance. I was a financial consultant, and I was beginning to sense a certain unease related to my profession. I had the chance to attend a leadership workshop, and with the desire that through this opportunity, I will learn more about what gives me meaning and how I can inject my profession with more joy and more purpose. And I was surprised that on the third day, the facilitator had asked us to flip the classroom. So he invited us to learn from one another. And he said the exercise we're invited to start is to give the speech of our 85th birthday. So we were supposed to speak about how our life was unfolding from the moment we were born until our current age, sharing the main highlights of our life, looking back, and from our current age until 85, to share the story of our life as if our deepest desires happened. And it was a really nerve-wracking experience, but one that was very freeing, because it was the first time where I allowed myself, or I recognized that I was really looking for meaning. Something was missing in my profession. And it was a chance to allow myself to project myself in a future that looked more like me. And it's not always easy, because we are busy. And we rarely take the time to slow down and allow these questions to challenge us. And silence is often uncomfortable, because it reveals parts of ourselves that may also call us upon the water. Yet it is by slowing down and making silence, making space, making a space where we can start listening to what's happening within, that we connect to our deeper lived experience and we begin to notice how God is at work in our life. This first part of dialogue in affirming our vocation starts with our inner dialogue, looking inward. Not looking inward with a sense of judgment or guilt, not this fruitless introspection, but mainly looking inward under God's loving gaze and listening not just to our thoughts, but to our emotions, to inner movements, and noticing which ones are opening us for more life, which ones are closing us off on ourselves, trapping us in fear and self-doubt. And in this silence, we begin listening to our deepest desires. And when we dare to name what are our desires for our profession, when we look back to the world, we may start seeing in the world needs that meet our desires. Each one of us has been given a chance to recognize in our own realities what are the cries of the world, what are the sufferings that speak to our needs as well. And it affirms a lot our vocation. So we begin asking ourselves questions. Are the voices, are the thoughts that we are going through drawing us closer to who we are? Is our actions, are the people with whom we're working bringing us closer to our vocation, or are they closing us up? And in the start today, in this morning, we had the chance to practice this Ignatian review. As a matter of fact, Ignatian spirituality offers a treasure, a real practice that helps us not only review in our day, but mainly in our history, how we have not been alone, how God has been accompanying us throughout the various stages of our life. Noticing how God has been.
Isten kéz a kézben szinte együtt járt velem. Nem tudom, látszik-e kellőképpen kivehető a kép. Gyakorlatilag az exámen nem csak arra való, hogy mérjük magunkat, hogy viszonyítsuk magunkat valamilyen szokványhoz vagy szabványhoz, hanem arra való, hogy arra világítsunk rá, hogy élet milyen szerepet.
If I could give words, if I can express where I found myself welling up in joy, where is that? And each one of us may have our own practices. The examen, the Ignatian review is one. Another is walking, praying, journaling. I find keeping a written track of these moments, of this inner journey, of this inner dialogue is very important because it gives us a chance to look back and see our story as a whole, not just with very happy moments or with very painful moments. We begin bringing the pieces together and we start recognizing common patterns. We start recognizing that in these kind of work, I am becoming more myself. We start recognizing that a lot of light and graces have been given to us. And maybe there are spaces in our vocation that are calling for more clarity, and we can name them. And all these tiny moments become like a building block in our graced history, in our story as a people called to walk upon water and make a difference in the world. And these moments, all of them begin pointing us back to our heart. So I will just invite us in a short moment of reflection with this theme of inner dialogue and silence. I'll hope the music will play. And the question I'm inviting you to ponder on is, how much do I make space for silence and reviews in my life? A space to reconnect to my deepest desires. And where may be some spaces where I'm invited for a deeper listening. So just 2 minutes, think about these questions, and then I'll invite you to turn to your neighbor and share a bit about them. Okay. If the music doesn't work, I will sing.
I can help you. Can you sing?
Can you click play? It's okay. Silence is better than music. Let's forget it. Okay. So just take some time to think about these questions. So I'll invite you to turn to a neighbor, introduce yourself if they don't know you, and just share whatever feels comfortable to you around these questions. A practice that you find, an area where you feel invited for deeper listening, just share a bit, like just 2 minutes. So maybe a few more seconds. How was it? Okay. I know we may need a full day to think about these questions. So we may need a full day or a retreat to think about these questions. And I hate to keep interrupting you. But I also hope at the end of this keynote, maybe we have a space where you share some of the impressions of what you're thinking, what you're sharing, and maybe ask questions. But so this one was one perspective of thinking about our vocation. Walking, not running, making space for silence. And it's true that silence, self-reflection, prayer with God helps us give meaning to our vocation. But the meaning is also best discerned in dialogue with the community, not in isolation. Our work as educators, as professionals, as teachers is most rewarding when we're doing it with others. It is in relationships and not in isolation that we recognize our gifts. It is the students, the colleagues, people whom we're serving that affirm us, that point us towards what gives us most life. By listening to their words of gratitude, by listening to their words of affirmation, by them thanking us to how we made an impact in our life, we begin to sense who we are and how we are called to serve the world. So this question of vocation, while it involves slowing down and praying and opening spaces of silence, it is never an endeavor that we do alone. It is one that we do with others. So it's important, just as we're slowing down, to check whether our lives are too packed or where there are spaces for silence. It's important to ask ourselves, if I ask people around me in the school today, what might be God's calling for me? What might be my gifts, my talents? What would they say? It is a question maybe that you can bring to your own communities and schools, or maybe include in your meetings. What would others say about my gifts, about my talents? And who are the people in my community who know me enough to provide these words of affirmation? And these questions are, if they're pointing us towards something, is that real dialogue goes way beyond just sharing ideas or sharing plans or setting agendas for meeting. Engaging in a real dialogue requires an openness from ourselves, a generosity, a disposition to learn. So I'm entering this interaction having in mind that it's a real encounter. And it's an encounter, it's a chance to meet another person that could give me something, that could change me. And it helps to remember that this person whom we're meeting, to come to this conversation with a predisposition that no matter our backgrounds, no matter how young we are, how different our beliefs, that each one of us has something to offer us. That the Spirit has been given to everyone and not to a select few. And that God works in those members in our team, especially those we are not getting along well with, those who press our buttons. So I think it's important when we're looking at how relationships can help us find meaning and can affirm us in our vocation, to shift our understanding of what a real dialogue is about. We often enter into dialogue with our phones in our hands, like we're so distracted, or we are talking with people and sometimes shaking our heads in meetings and thinking about something else. So our level of presence is not always full. And if we want really to encounter somebody else who will point us back to our vocation, it's important that we engage fully, that we enter wholly in this exchange. And as we're present, to listen or seek to understand not just ideas and words, we've become very rational people. But there's always this invitation to remember, like the poem in the start, that there's an entire world in the middle of this one. And beyond the ideas, there's the emotions, there's the values of the other person, there's their beliefs. So how open am I to welcome the fullness of another person? How ready am I to set aside my cynicism, my doubts, and be challenged by the views of somebody else, to bring my full heart, my compassion, and be ready to change, because genuine dialogues do not leave us the same. A genuine dialogue changes something in both, in the speaker and the listener. So to which extent am I having the courage and taking the risk to have these conversations? I understand that we are very busy and our works are often a series of meetings one after the other. But do we make space once a week or once a month just for a conversation that we will call a spiritual conversation? A conversation that is not just about tasks, but about welcoming how the Spirit might be working in us as a team, in our school, sharing at a deeper level. And it is probably one of the best gifts we can give one another, where we are engaging in a space that surprises us, that can bring to light elements that alone, as individual and members in a team, we cannot see. I love this image by a Jesuit priest called Brian Grongen, who suggested that in every meeting, the Trinity attends every meeting. God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit attend every meeting for him. Because what happens in the world and what is being discussed in these meetings is of divine concern. So if we bring to mind this image that God is present in every situation, because what we're talking about in our schools, the way we're planning, how we will accompany students, is of divine concern. It's not just a task to do. It's a chance to contribute in building a world like God intends it to be. So how will our conversations change if we have this image in mind? If we see these spaces as a space of encounter, of surprise, not just people talking together. So how would our way of engaging with one another be transformed if we keep in mind that the Spirit is at work here? And it's mainly in these spaces, within the challenges of dialogue and encounter, that we slowly begin to learn what it means to be church. We slowly begin to accept one another's failings and exercise patience. In the Discerning Leadership program that I'm participating in, that I'm facilitating in Rome, we have decided that leadership, and especially in Catholic and religious-based setting, is often very lonely. So people in these institutions leading in the church feel a lot of isolation and loneliness. So we have decided to gather accompaniers, spiritual directors, coaches, consultants from all over the world to accompany leaders who attend our workshops. And we gathered more than 50 practitioners. And because we are from all over the world, it was difficult for us to meet in person. So we were meeting online every time. And if I'm sharing this, it's just as an example that we had people from Australia and the States and Japan connecting to a common time, often a time that works for Europe. So this means waking up at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. from Australia or the States just to join the conversation. And if this commitment points to something, it points to the generative power of these spaces. People were not connecting online at 4 a.m. to talk about ideas. They have found in this community a space that touches their heart, that energizes them. I can attend a meeting because I have to when it's at 10 a.m. I would not set an alarm at 3 a.m. to join people from all over the world unless there's something nourishing about this gathering. So, and what made this space generative and nourishing was we made it intentional, no matter what was on the agenda, to make a space for prayer and sharing. Not just a prayer that we're repeating, but having moments of checking in with one another, and having a space in small groups, so when we're 60, we cannot share all together, breaking the group in small groups and giving participants a chance, even in groups of 3 or 5, to talk about their lived experience. What is giving me joy today? What are my struggles? And it's not always easy. Like, these processes challenge the way we work. We like to be efficient and do things back to back. But it's wonderful and so transformative to see when you invite people to talk from their heart about how they are, how the nature of relationship changes. And it wasn't always easy, especially for me. So as a coordinator or leader of this network, I had initiated these processes of sharing. But in the month following the Beirut explosion, I was really struggling with managing my grief. So I would have preferred that we start our meetings and get directly into business, because pausing and asking ourselves, how do you feel, would involve me looking inside and share that I was not feeling all the time okay. And it took me a lot of courage and maybe a nudge to take the risk and open up and let them know, and even sometimes shed a tear. Because it was no longer about putting masks and impressing one another. And I feel each one of us are daily faced with these choices. Do I want to show up with another person fully as I am, as much as I'm comfortable to share? Or do I want just to engage from the head with rationality and efficiency? And often it is the first kind of sharing, the authentic sharing, that brings about a deeper change in our communities. So while dialogue is inviting us, helps us at least, while dialogue helps us find meaning in one another, in supporting one another, in affirming each other's gift, we recognize that it is risky and it involves a certain courage. But when we dare to expose ourselves, when we dare to be slightly more vulnerable than what we're comfortable, we give others a permission to do the same. And slowly, we start inspiring others to show up in a way that honors our truth. People are inherently good. We think that if we share with one another a certain vulnerability, they would be very hard or they would not welcome it. In my experience, this rarely happened when we do this. So I'll invite you to think about your communities. Bring to mind the faces of members in your schools that you accompany, and ask yourself, what do I say about our communal experiences? We all long for these communal experiences where we affirm one another, where we share from the heart, where we feel safe. Because it's when we feel safe, it's only then that we can have bold initiatives and be creative and make a change. So if I look at my communities, can I say that our workplaces offer these spaces of connection, of mutual learning, of emotional safety? Do people feel comfortable showing up as they are in their limits? It will be very difficult for us to be creative and be innovative if people are afraid of making mistakes. So, do our workplaces offer these spaces? And if I look at the entire community, can I name a few members, not everyone, but can I name to myself a few members that belong to my circle, who are really companions, who affirm me? So just take a minute without music to think about these questions. And when I will give you a sign, to turn to maybe another neighbor or the same, you can choose, and share whatever feels comfortable for you. because I know this involves a level of disclosure that sometimes is very personal. So just take a time in silence to think about these. Without having to share your answers to these questions, you don't have to share to your neighbor whether your space in school offers these qualities or not. Just turn to your neighbor and share an idea or something that this part of my keynote evoked in you, whatever you feel comfortable. So it's a chance to talk a bit about this point, about how dialogue in community and in relationship can affirm our sense of vocation. Just whatever you feel comfortable with. So process this with someone next to you. Maybe a few more seconds. So I will gently invite you back. I hope you've been enjoying these sharings. And if you've been sharing about these questions or even about what was happening yesterday and when you were having a drink, this energy in the room confirms the power of sharing and the power of community, and how much when we meet somebody else and bring them a piece of what we're going through, what we're thinking about, there's a bond that is built. And we all long for these companionships, for these circles of family, of people who support us. And this next, if you want, pillar in my keynote, or this other theme, is mainly linked to the times where God seems to invite us to walk upon waters away from the comfort of our circles, away from these environments that look like us, that affirm us, and sometimes invite us to set out and build bridges and go to frontiers. My frontiers geographically is Syria, and with the work of the Catholic Church, I've also come to learn other frontiers, especially when working with people who are Christian but who are not Catholic or Ignatian. But I think the concept of frontiers or this diversity differs from one to another. And while the examples that I will share pertain to my experience, I'm inviting you, as you listen to these examples, to think about who may be your frontiers. What is the diversity that you as educators are engaged with today? And how this dialogue with this diversity can also be a space for you to find meaning and to strengthen in your vocation. Who are the people maybe in your school who are very different and whom you have never thought of being invited to set forth towards? My first experience of frontiers, in a literal and in a figurative way, was in 2016, when I was invited to accompany Muslim groups in Syria, mainly the workers of the Jesuit refugee services in Syria. And another experience that I was offered more recently was a work with a group of Protestants and Catholic who wanted to discern together a common plan in service of the church in Sweden. And so while a big part of my work was engaged in projects with the Catholic Church, I was slowly seeing that my work was opening up to circles that were not necessarily Catholic nor Ignatian. And this was scary in itself, because whenever we feel something out of our comfort zone, it challenges us. But looking back, I have seen how these experiences of diversity and frontiers were also opportunities to be creative. And I think the biggest lesson was that I can still collaborate with God and I can still live my vocation without necessarily evangelizing or using spiritual terms or Ignatian terms the way I'm comfortable to do. I can still show up and live my vocation even without reference to terms that another person from a different faith may not relate to. And the difference here is less about what I'm saying and more who am I being in presence of this diversity. How can I be a witness rather than just a preacher? There were also these opportunities, these frontiers were also an opportunity, a chance to meet one another as human beings. To be surprised by what someone from a different religion or someone with whom I had probably a lot of prejudice, I can connect with. These experiences of diversity surprise us because we risk understanding and sometimes feeling with someone whom we thought was a stranger. And although these challenges, these opportunities bring a lot of challenge and newness, they also bring an experience where something bigger than us can meet us there. It's no longer about what we are doing, but sometimes we're surprised by grace at work in the middle of this challenge. When the director of JRS Syria called me in 2016 asking to facilitate a work with his group there, I was immediately very excited. This invitation brought a lot of a sense of purpose. I said, I want to go there. It also brought some anxiety, not necessarily because in 2016 the war was still going, not in all Syria, in parts of it. I was surprised by the peace I was experiencing when this invitation came, unlike my parents and my friends, to whom I had slightly to lie when I was telling them that I was going to Homs and Damascus. But the level of unease or this inner struggle I was experiencing was mainly around how, as a Christian, as someone who, I was taking Ignatian spirituality back then very seriously, and I think it's not very Ignatian to be very explicitly Ignatian because we're called to meet people where they are. But I was really struggling in facilitating these sessions around hope, around leadership, around purpose. First of all, in spaces where pain was so predominant, where there was so much suffering, and also with people who don't share my faith, people who don't see the world the way I do. And I was so grateful that I went there because going there uncovered how much prejudice I had on people whom I did not know. And these prejudice were prejudice I carried from long time ago. And they were very much fueled by the conflict between Lebanon and Syria. Our country was occupied by Syrians. So there was a deep-seated belief that I'm going to people who were occupiers. And I'm going to meet people who don't share my faith. So I went with my prejudice, and the experience, how it unfolded, helped me come back with a lot of friendships and connections. And a big part of the people you're seeing on the screen have become friends. I went to Syria with some fears about, will they find joy? And the smiles, the connection, the fun we were having were deeply inspiring. I learned strength and resilience from the stories they shared. It was deeply moving to see how much they were committed to build a future, to think about a future, even as some of them were receiving news on their phones that parts of their towns were being bombed. And I'm not saying this to emphasize our strength, but just to say how much grace can work even in these dark places. So instead of this experience emphasizing how helpless I was, I learned to let go. And I learned to welcome in these spaces God bringing us together, helping us trust one another, get to know one another. The picture here is in Sweden, where this group of Protestant and Catholic wanted to discern together a bit about their future, the future of their church. And we started with this exercise of composing their history line. And our history is composed with events, and a lot of these events are very painful. So they gathered and they put on a line what were the key events that have marked their history. And we also opened spaces of listening and sharing about the events themselves, but also how we have experienced personally these events. And it was so moving to see people from different denomination be in conversation and spend time with one another over a fire and say that we are experiencing now what it means to be church. So I think the invitation is not to forget that even in these spaces where we feel challenged by diversity, by someone who's not the same as us, we are also able to live our vocation. if we dare to look at one another as not seeing the faces of people, but the life behind the faces, and ask ourselves, how can we show up in a way that makes a difference? This can also be even more powerful for our vocation, because we witness in these spaces something bigger and bigger from us at work. So the question I will briefly invite you to think about, not for a long time, is just in your own context, in your schools, who are the strangers? What are the frontiers to which you feel called? It can be someone from your team with whom you don't get along well, and it can be refugees or people from a different nationality. So what could be some of my concrete frontiers where I'm called to walk upon water? Just take a minute in silence and we'll do the same. If you want to turn to somebody behind you to change partners, unless you feel comfortable by continuing the sharing with those with whom you started to talk. So please feel free to share if you would like. Just something, a reaction around what you have heard. So can I invite us back? I was just checking. First, I want to thank you for engaging with these questions. It's difficult to think about questions that are so deep in a short amount of time, so thank you. But I hope at least that the question, and I can send you the slides if they are meaningful in any way, could be seeds that you can take and deepen with you if they resonate, if they created an echo. I realize that a minute and a half or 2 minutes with these questions is not enough. I'm coming to the end of this keynote, and I think the last part that I wanted to offer was mainly around our belief that sometimes vocation has a lot to do with doing, and has a lot to do with doing things that are big, like changing the world. And how my experience in the past years in Beirut, especially after the explosion and a lot of the pain that happened, kind of challenged this belief, but helped me understand vocation in a different way. So this will be mainly the topic of the last part, how being in dialogue with the world, as painful and sometimes difficult it is, can also affirm our vocation, and how struggles in our daily reality can shape the way we understand our role. On August 4th, 2020, 2 years ago, at 5:30, so it was half an hour before the explosion, I had a meeting with, I was finishing a meeting at a friend's house. And I was telling her that I need to leave early because I had a Skype call at 6 p.m. with work. So she invited me to stay over and said, you can do the Zoom call in my house. I knew that she had something else and that she would have to stay in the house just for me, for the Zoom. So I said, I better go back home. Had we both stayed in her house, we would have definitely been wounded, like thousands of people in the Middle East. This was her living room. And the experience of the explosion, although I was at home and both of us were safe, the destruction that this event had brought to our life was beyond the physical destruction. It's true that the explosion destroyed half of Beirut, half of the city, but it also destroyed a lot of people's hopes and sense of certainty and their dreams, especially that no accountability or sense of justice has been achieved yet. So people feel that these kind of events can happen, and it's an ongoing feeling of struggle. And this kept growing with the economic crisis, with the devaluation of the currency. So the past years have been deeply struggle. There was a deep struggle for a lot of people, and for me as well. And I don't think I would have been able to live in this reality and stand in this mess hadn't it been of a gaze of faith. It's very difficult to stand there and look at this reality without giving it meaning and without a sense of community where we are there for one another. The past years have been mainly a space of waiting. Sometimes suffering can trigger a response from us. So when we're facing injustice, when we're facing the sufferings of the world, there's an inner desire where we feel called to do something. I want to do something to change this reality. And there's something really noble and sacred about what suffering can create in us. But at the same time, I have learned that sometimes suffering is an opportunity or a call. The call that comes with suffering is sometimes just to stand there with our helplessness, with our fears, with our hurt, and not allow this reality to change us. and actually show up in this reality. The image that one sister from our Discerning Leadership program used was standing with Jesus at the foot of the cross. So sometimes the painful reality are just an invitation to stand there and not do anything, because it's very difficult to change it, but try to see how this reality can soften us, how this helplessness can open something in us that connects us to the pain of others, and that can help us become more present and become more human. Because it's in this pain, when we allow ourselves to feel it, that we can really show up with one another and meet one another where we are. Often what was happening was called for for a deeper presence than just doing something. And it challenged in many ways my voluntary nature, my willfulness. I'm somebody who likes a lot of action. And I remember meeting with the Jesuits every time and asking them, what is this calling us to do? We need to do something. And I was just forgetting that just by being there and allowing this reality to shape me, to change something in me, the call will come later. After some time, a year almost after this call, I gathered a group of friends to review the year as it unfolded and try to look together for meaning. So we created another history line of from October 2019 to October 2020, mapping the key events that created a deep response within us and having a conversation about how these events are shaping us. And it was so transformative to see that in the pain there were many graces received. And each one of us was highlighting small moments where they experienced grace at work. And that the year, despite its suffering, was not that bad. So we learned that living our vocation is not necessarily in big transformative projects, but also in the small ways we choose to show up in the world, in a way that is loving, in a way that is collaborative. We have witnessed how in many small ways people were reaching out to one another. During the fuel crisis, we have seen a group of volunteers pushing an ambulance that ran out of fuel in the middle of the road. Friends were sending boxes full of medication and food. Some restaurants in the internet crisis had invited people to come in and use their Wi-Fi without having to order anything. So it's just pausing and looking back at our reality with eyes of faith. We realize that God is active. God is active in the world. God is active in our struggles. God is present if we just open spaces to see and to witness God, whether in silence, in community, within diversity, in the frontiers, but also in the painful parts of our world. And in the moments where we feel stretched beyond our limits, where we feel disconnected from this sense of vocation, this is often an invitation, instead of walking on water, to reconnect to source and go back to the call, the one who's calling us to set out and recharge and strengthen our faith. And remember how sacred it is, our vocation, our ministry to accompany students, how sacred it is, and how we can accompany them in helping them realize their full potential in ways that sometimes are small and others are big, but all of them will contribute in giving them a more fulfilled and full life. So I will just leave you with these images. And as a way to close this reflection, and I don't know if we have time to offer questions or just a feedback from you, as a way to close our reflection, I will close again with a poem, another one. It's called The Second Music by Annie Lightheart. The heart of this poem, or the sense of it, is that the truth of our life, our deepest vocation, is heard by listening to a quiet voice, the second music. So I will just offer it to you, and we can have the closing words. Now I understand that there are two melodies playing, one below the other, one easier to hear, the other lower, steady, perhaps more faithful for being less heard, yet always present. When all other things seem lively and real, this one fades. Yet the notes of it touch as gently as fingertips, as the sound of the names laid over each child at birth. I want to stay in that music without striving or cover. If the truth of our lives is what it is playing, the telling is so soft that this mortal time, this irrevocable change becomes beautiful. I stop and stop again to hear the second music. I set my ear to it as I would to a heart. I hope that we too set our ears to this second music and continue to respond to its voice with a lot of generosity and courage. So thank you for listening. I don't know how much time we have, if there's like a few minutes for just a reaction or a question. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Szóval bátorítom önöket, hogyha kérdésük.
Would like to just encourage you to please, should you have any feedback or question or comment, feel free to come forward and use the podium. I'm certainly aware that this is probably the most exciting and
to dare to ask. Szóval akkor, ha nincs kérdés.
Since there do not seem to be questions, I thank you, Sandra, again. You may want to know that she will stay. She'll stay with us, and she will remain available, so she will be within reach. She'll remain within reach.
Ez a második prezentáció, ugye?
Azért ez egy, hogy álljunk fel bátran, mert azért ez így nehéz volt, vagy sok minden volt, szóval egy kicsit mozgásra bátorít mindannyiunkat, és nyújtózkodunk együtt. Acsvajnak, bár szerintem ezeket a gondolatokat követeljük is, mert ezek tényleg nagyon jók, jó? Nekem már volt szíveszik a botunkba kirohanni az összes mindig segít. De nagyon tisztelt igazából szünetet nem szeretnénk tartani, úgyhogy csak így helyben mozdulunk meg kicsit, jó?
Tudja, hogy most a
És most tényleg csak ennyi, kicsit kinyújtóztattuk magunkat, akkor folytatjuk, mert igen.
That we have stretched our limbs, we can carry on. We can carry on with the next part because it will be equally interesting, and then we can just find our seats and then we can just go on and continue this session.
A képarány vágja le.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for your presentation. And after a story like that, and after such an experience, it's quite difficult for me to say anything, but I'm really very grateful for Sandra to be with here, and thanks her for sharing her thoughts and ideas. And she's going to help us open this round table session because she emphasized the importance of dialogue and how it can confirm our vocation. And then we called for a dialogue to some talented and gifted professionals, and also a lady who is still in training. And from them, we'd really like to know what they find as challenges in their vocation and what they find as favorable and beautiful in their vocation. So very briefly, I'd like to introduce them to you. First of all, Charlotte Glovitsky. She is a third-year student, she specialized in autism spectrum, and third-year special education students at ALTA, majoring in autism spectrum pedagogy and psychopedagogy, been guided by many life experiences, choose this career for herself. Her time spent with young people with learning disabilities, her volunteer work in children's homes, in sex ed, her leadership in a Scout Association in Volko have all been decisive influences. Martin teaches history and social studies at the Jesuit High School in Krakow. Despite her young age, he is a real driving force behind both the school's marketing activities and student recruitment. Teaching is a real opportunity for him as it allows him to develop many of his competences, and at the same time he constantly receives help in his work. Christian Shimko returned to his old school five years ago as a geography and biology teacher after his years at the Jesuit High School. His passion for his he majored in geography and biology. His passion for his studies began as a child, and he's making perfect a scoring system on, and he's trying to teach his students about the created world and trying to bring them closer to reality. And may I kindly request Kingo to act as moderator, and 5 minutes before the end of the session, I shall signal to you.
Can all use. I'm going to facilitate this conversation in English. Sometimes, however, we might need to switch from English into Hungarian, so that can be a kind of mixture of the two languages, but I hope you will be okay with this. And I really encourage the participants to feel free to switch into Hungarian if they find it necessary. Unfortunately, it's only Marcin who can speak Polish, so he doesn't really have the chance to switch into Polish. That's it. And before asking them to say a few personal words about themselves after this introduction, I just would like to say how privileged I feel to be accompanied by these young people. And I really hope that I can call them my friends. As we all know that we don't really have too many young people in our educational system. We hardly have any young teachers in our institutions. And there are not too many young people who would like to become teachers. So this is number one reason that I feel privileged. But the other reason is that all these guys are very, very smart people. And I really appreciate when I have the chance to talk to young, smart people, because I can learn so much from them personally, and because they are always ready to give me feedback. Sometimes they even dare to criticize me, which is really great. This is perhaps something I really enjoy, because these critical remarks help me to think my ideas over and help me to grow. And I also enjoy their special sense of humor. And I've tried to convince them that it could be a kind of personal talk, as if we were at home. But you know that they still feel kind of excited, or they have some butterflies in the stomach, but hopefully they will forget about you, and then we can have just a lovely conversation between us. So even though Itza has introduced them, I still would like them to say a few words about their personal and professional life. So let me start with you, Shaci. Okay? You can have that. Sorry.
Okay. Hello. I'm Charlotte Glovitsky, and I'm 21 years old. I graduated from Jesuit High School in Miskolc, and I'm currently studying special need education at ELTE, specializing autism spectrum pedagogy and psychopedagogy. And I'm currently researching and develop career guidance for disadvantaged children with a board game. And I have been a scout for 11 years and scout leader for 7 years. So I don't have so much free time, but when I do, I mostly I like spend it with my friends, and I like anything what is interactive and extreme. I like hiking, and I like to cook and eat, and I like to play guitar and listen to music.
Great, thank you so much. Marcin, would you like to continue?
Hello, my name is Marcin Musia. I'm from Poland, Krakow specifically, and I am the only one not Hungarian here, so it's a little bit. I'm a little bit stressed. If someone is asking something about me, I always say that I have two main hobbies. One hobby is graphic design. Actually, I sometimes thought that one day I thought that it would be actually my professional career, that I will became a professional graphic designer, but I chose to be a teacher. I don't know if this is good or not, but and the second thing I really love to do is going around, sightseeing, traveling, seeing the things most of the people will not see. As a historian, as a social studies teacher, I like to see many things different. And for example, me and my fiance, we have a scratch map. I don't know it. Do you mean the scratch map of Poland, where we can see the places to see in Poland? And sometimes even me, as someone who lives in Poland for 26 years, I don't know many of these places. I try to see them as much as I can, and I try to travel around Poland because I see now that every country has not only most famous places. Every single village, even small one, has something to share with us. And this is my main two hobbies. And right now I'm a teacher in Koska. Koska is a name of our school. It's a high school. And I went there just after my university, so I think it's everything from me. Yeah, it's also Jesuit school in Krakow. We have like three high schools of Jesuits in Poland, and one primary school, if I'm not mistaken.
Létezik Lengyelországban egyik ezeknek általános iskola. Hát én egy jezsuita középiskolában tanítok Krakóban. Köszönöm szépen.
Krisztián, te is mutatkozz be, ha nem is utolsó sorban, de utolsóként. Sinko Krisztián vagyok, 28 éves, Miskolcról jöttem, biológiát és...
This is my 5th year as a teacher. Before it, I studied here in Budapest for 6 years, so I lived here for 6 years. I have to spend a lot of time with preparation for my lessons, so I also don't have so much free time. But in my free time, I play guitar, I ride my bike, I like to run, and I watch series. So that's it.
And don't forget to mention that you are also a former student of our school. We are very proud that we can have a teacher who was a student in our school. So in spite of the fact that he attended the school, he teaches there. So this is
I returned to my school.
Yes. Okay, thank you for sharing some personal facts about yourself. And now I would like you to share the highlights of your job or of your studies, the joy, the positive experience you can have as a teacher or as a university student. Oh gosh. Let me start with you, Christian, now, okay?
Okay. The highlights in my work and in the school is when I can motivate my students, because they don't have to make a final exam in my subjects, so it's very good for me if they choose an advanced level course in biology or geography, and if they choose a competition in these subjects, and if I give them tasks when they have to write essays in different topics, and they are very good. So the motivation is the most important highlights in my work.
Okay, would you say a few words about some of the projects you are involved in together with your students? Because that might be something interesting for us.
Which one do you think?
You can choose any of these.
Okay. One of my projects is about sustainability. We made extra lessons for our students. about environmental education and sustainable development, for example.
Thank you so much. Martin, would you like to share some of the highlights of your work?
If I think about why I actually love this kind of job, love to work in education, because this job is sometimes scares me, it sometimes frustrates me, but I love in this kind of job that this is not the monotony. I was working back in the days in the building company. It was repeating over and over the same things. It was also fun, but I hate monotony. I hate to spend time on the same thing over and over again. And of course, on the lessons, sometimes I need to say the same things to one class and 1 year to another class and so on. But after all, you get 20, even 30 new people. They are in front of you. They have own beliefs. They have own ideas. They have own questions. So this job is actually for me the way of not feeling monotony in the work. I work for a living, right?
I know that you have participated or have been participating in international projects, because that's how we met. So can we say that it's also something that belongs to the highlights of your job? Would you say a few words about these projects, please?
It's actually hard to say in how many time we have?
Forget about it.
Because it's very hard to actually say everything I need to do in school. My key actually point of interest, point of duty in school is promotional things in terms of doing graphic design, doing posters, brochures, doing videos, montage of these videos. I'm also responsible for the sites, for the Facebook page, and so on. But on the other side, I try to also spend as much time I can with the students. So right now, I'm mostly trying to prepare some of my students to the last exam, to the from history, because they need to after the high school in Poland we have the last exam, and they need to choose some subjects. Some subjects are obligatory, some subjects are extras, and they choose the history, and I try to actually prepare them for this last exam. So on one case, I try to be connected with the cases of the school in terms of school as an office, as a company, let's say, and on the other hand, the educational and the lessons and the students. So yeah. And if about the international projects, actually it's actually quite new thing. I helped Ivona. She is the responsible for international project in our school. I helped her in some cases, mostly promotional cases, the cases of the technical cases, and thanks to that, I was invited to the Portugal as a teacher with our students as a part of the Erasmus project. That was the moment when I met Kinga, when I met Edith, who is on the audience, and thanks to that, I also got the email from Kinga about the possibility of being here in Hungary, because this is my first time in Hungary, first time in Budapest, so and I'm very grateful for it.
Shati, how about your highlights?
I'm just a student, but I work with disadvantaged children, and I think this is an incredibly exciting adventure, my career, because I always like in maths and chemistry, there is a problem and always there is a result. If you use the basis you had already learned, you get results. And special need education is same. With children with special educational needs, you always get results. If you use the cognitive, psychological, neurobiological basis that you learned at your university, you get results. And I really enjoy of this work is never boring, practical, and serious, maybe.
Yes, Martin has shared some of his duties besides teaching. So would you also say some words, what else you are involved in besides studying in university? So you are part of a project. I know that you have said a few words about the research you are busy with, but say a few words about these extra stuff you are doing, okay?
Okay, so I'm a scout, and I work spiritual education in Buda region. It is maybe 5,000 scout, and I mentor disadvantaged children, and I do research about career guidance. And before university, I went to Transylvania to orphanage, and I learned so much about disadvantaged children and education.
Thank you so much. And not surprisingly, Christian is also extremely busy with different duties in our school. So would you also say a few words about what else you do besides teaching biology and geography?
For example, I with three other colleagues, we made the timetable of the school, and
which is not a simple timetable, so I think you want to add something.
It's a very difficult timetable, so we need so much time to make it. And I work with students to prepare for competitions several times in a year. And yes, and and digitalization is very important for me, but I want to use it only if it's efficient. So I spend a lot of time with digitalization, digital tasks, and pedagogy.
And you also offer trainings for my generation, how you can apply digital techniques in everyday lessons.
Yes, so yes, I forgot it.
Yes, thank you so much. Now I would like you to say some words about the challenges you have to face with, challenges you have to cope with. Do we have a volunteer to start with? Or maybe we can start with Poland. What challenges you...
I don't know if this is good to start with Poland because our national sport is actually complaining, but I will try to not complain as much as I can. Being a teacher is, especially with the subject which is not obligatory on the last exams in high school, is hard in terms of actually motivate students to learn this subject, because history is not always fun. History is not always about, unfortunately, the things which is very fascinating arithmetic for students is always word that and many things similar to that. And history is not always about that, and sometimes we need to say about more lazy things, and we have to actually sometimes motivate to that, and this is the problem, because when they see that some subject for example maths, it's important, it's obligatory, they know that they must learn it, right? And history for many of my students is actually something extra, and I wish that after 5-10 years after the school they will say that maybe I didn't like this subject, but this teacher trying to learn us something.
Challenges for me, the biggest challenge is to prepare for my lessons, because I need so much time, and I have 4 advanced level classes in biology and in geography, and I have to prepare for the final exams, the high level final exams. So it's very difficult to me, because I have to know almost everything, and they have difficult questions about the material. So this is the most difficult thing for me now.
To be honest, children with special education needs, you can achieve smaller results slower. And it can be really difficult to be patient and happy. And another difficulty for me is society's judgment, because there are a lot of people who think I am too stupid became a psychologist or regular teacher, so I became special need educator. And they said I'm just drawing with children, and that's nice, but it's not serious work. And sometimes it's really hard.
Yes, and maybe this is the sentence which I can continue with asking: why you think it is important to have young teachers in a school? Why is it so essential to have young people who want to become teachers or even special ed teachers? So why we, the society, needs you? Christian, maybe you can start.
Okay, I think young teachers we can be fresh. We can bring new methods to the teaching, and the students have a different attitude to us.
Definitely. So I have to share a short story. I can kind of envy of Christian, because we have got boards with, you know, when a class graduates from the school, that there is a board with pictures, the photos on it. And I'm in my office, I can always hear students talking about Christian and just looking at his photo. And I told the students that they should go downstairs and see my board, because our board, the board of my class, is much more beautiful than his board. But every student just wants to see his photo. So this is one of the reasons why we need young teachers. But yes, okay. What else can you say, Martin?
Of course, I agree with Christian in everything, actually, but I feel that the age is some kind of wall. When you imagine the wall, it is a wall between the student and teacher. This wall is always, because we are not the same, we are in a different age or something like that. They have other beliefs, then we have other beliefs. They watching their films, we are watching our films, right? For example, and as the gap between the age between the students and the teacher is small, the year gap is small, then I think this wall is smaller, and we can see many things which older teachers cannot see, and I think this is the most important. That there is of course there is a barrier between us because we are on a different type or a different period of life. I mean, students and the teachers, young teachers. But on the other hand, they are. It isn't impossible to be in some way be their colleagues in some kind of in the way of thinking. Let's say they can share many things to us, to the young teachers, because they feel they can be understand. I think this is the most important.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think school is not the place where strict adults tell how you do things. It should be shared creative workshop where develop everyone, teachers and students. And I had experienced the students feel that more if they are mentored by younger teacher. And another interesting thing, if older teacher teach a value and I disagree with it, I can easily believe that because that are outdated. And if it is taught by a younger teacher, maybe if I disagree with it, I look into myself first.
Okay, so now I know how refreshing it is that we have got you in our schools, but I also would like you to say some words about your relationships. Maybe in one answer, I would like you to describe your relationship with your peers, with your co-workers, and also your relationship with students. In what way you find it challenging to have a stable relationship with your colleagues, and in what way you can find support or encouragement in these two-level relationships. Okay? How about starting with you, Shachi, now? Or do you need more time? Or do you want to? But you do have, I mean, I know that you are not working yet, but you do have university students who you have to work with, and you also have teachers. Yes. So you can talk about the relationship with your teachers and with your university peer students, okay?
Okay. I'm a very stubborn student, so sometimes I don't like teamwork because I know my own way and I want to do things my own way. So I have to develop teamwork a lot, and with teacher too. To be honest, I don't like ALTE, and I try to make that a better place where we are not just children, we are in a playmate, in a team, but it's very difficult because in university the teachers are so much older than high school, and the wall is bigger, I think, in university.
The integration into a new community for me was always a hard thing, a difficult thing. And 4 years ago, when I arrived to the school as a teacher, my former teachers become to my colleagues, and it was strange, but I found friends. I can spend a lot of time with them. I can laugh with them, and if I have a problem, somebody always help me, and I also try to help them. So I like the community, and I have friends in my colleagues. And the students, yeah, I think it's sometimes difficult because the age difference is small, and sometimes their attitude is like I'm their friend, and I have to be strict with this, and I think I found an equation in this thing.
In terms of relations with the colleagues from the school, it was something that I didn't expect it, because I'm not a former student of our high school. I'm from another place. I lived in Krakow since 2 years, and when I started to work in this high school, I thought that the gap because of age will be very high, and it wasn't like that. I came into the teacher's room, and I was they asking me about my opinion. They asking to help them with something, with digitization or something like that. So I was feeling that when I started the job as a teacher, that I will be on the lowest position, let's say, because of age. That I need to be older, more experienced, just to be on their level, let's say. And no, it's not like that. I don't know how it works in the normal public school in Poland, because I'm the only school which I work is a Jesuit school. But it was something that I didn't expect it. In terms of students, I think that I try to be maybe not their colleague, but I try to be someone who understands them, because my not very important, but also the hobby is to actually try to watch and be connected with the things they are connected, right? When there is some dramas on YouTube or something like that, I try to be on the point, and sometimes it's not good, because sometimes I understand what they are talking about, and sometimes I would prefer not to, but they are always very surprised that me as a teacher, I actually understand what they are talking about. They are talking about some YouTube stars, and I know what they are talking about. So it's the relationship with the students is, of course, the gap. As I am a teacher, they are students. It's always important to me. They cannot be more open, because it would be awkward. It would be not appropriate. But on the other hand, I try to be a little bit more open to them.
We are finishing very soon, but perhaps the most important question that I would like to ask is about your faith. I know that for each of you, faith is the core of your life. How you relate your personal faith in God to your job. Saci.
The faith gives me meaning of my work because if I can believe in an invisible force, I can believe that Romeo Lakatos will learn read because both is absurd. And the faith helps also to me not to fall into the trap of worldly achievement, because I said the child with special educational needs, smaller results, slower. And because I'm a Christian, I know the life is more than that. And it helps me a lot. I know the results is not everything. If my students become better than yesterday, my work is good and enough.
Faith in my job in the school. I think I don't do any special thing. I just give myself and I think my faith is in my attitude to my students when I give them a new chance or I don't give. And I think I'm an example for them. So that's it.
Maybe the retreats. A leggyakorlatok.
Yeah. In retreats, I'm a group leader. If I have to be a group leader, and in this time we can speak about everything in a few hours.
The faith in my case, I think that I took something from the Christianity, ideology of the Christianity, in terms of thinking about everyone as a personal, as a person, right? Because the problem is in schools. I don't know if in Hungary, but in Poland, the problem is we are more thinking about the group of people, not only about the people as a person, individual person. And Christianity actually came with the idea that everyone is important, no matter the wage, no matter the how old he is, no matter how big house he has. So I think that it helps me to understand that it's not always about the group. It's sometimes about the growing up of one person from the class. Of course, it is important to actually growing in terms of group, but if one person who wasn't good, for example, in history, trying to be better, and he's better and better after struggle, it is important for me.
So just finally, I would like to express my gratitude for this personal testimony, for you being here, for you being ready to answer the call, and for you being committed to your vocation of teaching. So thank you so much, and I think they deserve a big applause. Yes.
Kedves
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished conference goers, and everyone having joined online, I'm especially esteemed and thankful for all of you to have been with us in person and online during the morning session, and thank you for having assisted us in our efforts to put our boat and ourselves upon waters. This brings us to the conclusion of our session. Thank you for coming. Please spread the word universally. And probably the two lessons learned during the day, two lessons, so put it, as far as I'm concerned, is number one, Sandra brought in dialogue, brought in and showed and demonstrated how important in our vocation dialogue is. And this is something that has been supported in to great extent by our young roundtable discussion participants. And it is our job to make others understand just what goes on in our students and peers. Thank you for the Jesuit community, for their assistance, for making this conference reality. Thank you, Jesuit School Feni Jula and all of its staff. Although we will resume and continue in the afternoon session. Thank you, Kinga and her team. And special thanks go to Judith Serenge, who volunteered to report on the events of our conference. Thank you for the National Talent Fund for their assistance. May you be blessed both online and in person. I wish you a lot of success.
Ez csak egy technikai szünet volt.
This was but a technical interval, because that is when we switched off and came offline. And although we are behind time a bit,